Call to order the Cuyahoga County Work Session for Tuesday, June the 11th, 2013. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Schron. Here. Ms. Conwell. Here. Mr. Jones. Here. Mr. Rogers.
Here somewhere.
Ms. Simon. Here. Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Here. Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Here. Ms. Conley.
Here. We are here for a presentation this afternoon on an update of the Cuyahoga County Administration Complex. So I'm not sure who's going to go first. You see one? Do you have that back?
Thank you. Bonnie T1, Director of Public Works. Thank you for having us here today to give you an update on the county headquarters. Today we'd like to go over our budgeted amount for all the items that we perceive in the next, what would it be? Next year, I guess, in 2014, on what our expected expenditures should be. First of all, I think it's important to
I'll let the record reflect that Mr. Rogers has joined.
Sorry, I'm going to start with the last slide. First of all, I think it's important to go over what's included in GEIS's core and shell. These are all the items that they are responsible for building out. The key as far as the interiors, when the tenant improvement is the interior, one of the things here that with GEIS is that they are responsible for the finishes for the lobbies on the first floor and the fourth floor. They are responsible for the finishes in the elevator core, for the ceilings, the floors, the walls. They are responsible for that, and for the common toilet rooms they are responsible for. In addition to the rest of the construction items, the rooftop garden, it's their responsibility. So we wanted to make sure that you could see all the things that GEIS is responsible for on their end. So if we go to, now if we get to the tenant improvement, all the things that are included in the tenant improvement here are interior improvements, the construction and finishes. These are all the walls that are being built, the doors, the hardware, glass, the floor finishes. These are all in the departments. Once we get into each of the departments, it's our responsibility, our cost for the tenant improvements for those items. Fixed equipment and appliances, we're having coffee areas on each of the floors in the departments. The kitchen equipment that's associated with that, a refrigerator, sinks that are for those build-outs. Also, our security scanning equipment is included in that item. Plumbing systems. When GEIS builds out the building, what they're basically doing as far as our utilities is they're bringing all the utilities, the water, the HVAC, the electricity, the data, they're bringing it up to each floor and stubbing it out. At that point, then it's our responsibility for the cost for those items. So from each floor, when we bring it out to each of the offices, to each of the areas, it's included in the tenant improvements. So as you go through each of these items, you can see all the costs that are included for the tenant improvements. The HVAC, again, they'll stub it out at the core, and then we bring it into the individual offices, the individual areas. The phone data, security systems. Our responsibilities, again, are in the department. GEIS is responsible for security cameras, access on all the exterior locations, the lobbies, the elevator cores, the stairwells. Security is their responsibility. If it's security within each of the departments, that's our responsibility for cost. We've added a budget in for public art in our building. And then, again, the furniture cost, the desks, the chairs, workstations. What we did want to do, you see a little asterisk by our conference tables. What we want to do is we want to inventory the items that we have in our current facilities right now to see if some of those conference tables we can reuse if they fit in the buildings. Same thing with our audiovisual. By way of example, some of this equipment here we might want to use. So one of the first thing we're doing, and I think we're actually doing it now, is inventory our audiovisual, seeing where we can reuse it, help in saving some cost. Same thing with our conference tables. Any specific specialized pieces of furniture equipment, for example, in Public Works, we have a lot of flat files for plans. Rather than buying new, we would just reuse those. And then there's permitting fees. The budgeted amount we have at for all of our tenant improvements, which includes the security and the AV data and furniture, is a little over $36 million. What we did is trying to get it to a comparable cost to see how this is. And again, this is a budgeted amount. We're working on the details of all of this, so we don't have exact costs, so it's budgeted amount. This is what it equates to per square footage. If we look at industry Class A office space ranges, could range anywhere from a low end of 110 to a high end of 170.
Madam President. Thank you. I just had a question on the build-out stuff that we're responsible for. Would we be contracting out with some other contractor to do that work? Would some of that work be done by our own in-house staff? And would it be done while the building is still under construction?
So these tenant improvements, part of our lease agreement is Geis will be responsible for these tenant improvements. The agreement that we have with Geis is any of these work that they contract out, they will get 3 bids and present the bids to us before any of the work is done.
And again, so that work would then be going on, we would give them our plans up front of what tenant improvements we'd like, and they would, so, you know, we're not building walls and then having to break up the walls to go back into and to put. Correct.
This is kind of a hybrid bridging project. The way we created this project is that URS, representing us, working with us and our different departments, are laying out the tenant improvements. So we're getting to about 65-75% design. Usually what happens is when there's change orders, it gets into that situation where there was conflicts between different trades, and just like you said, we might have to rip out a wall to put something in because it wasn't planned for. But what we're doing to eliminate the change orders is that we're giving that 75% design to Geis. They're finishing up the design to hopefully resolve some of those conflicts, and in return, they're giving us a guaranteed maximum price. So once we have that guaranteed maximum price, there should not be any overruns because they have addressed all of their conflicts within that last 25%.
Public art, what's the dollar figure on public art?
Usually based on a certain percentage of the total project.
I think we have about
382,000 around.
And we were advocates for using the developmentally disabled folks
It's, what it will be is, there'll be a consultant that's hired that identifies space, identifies the locations for public art, and identifies the type of art. Some might be rotating, some might be a sculpture, so there will be different opportunities for public art. So it's not all or, all of one thing. It'll be a multitude of different things.
Don't we have an arts commission? Couldn't they do that? Do we have to have a consultant that we have to hire?
In Arts Commission.
Don't we,
Well,
$17 million.
but
yeah,
I have some legislation that we've never introduced that it would have a commission to deal with that. So I should probably get that introduced, to have a committee made up of various people around the county to, because, we have issues about statuaries and that kind of stuff, so.
and then the park allowance, what is that?
It's Art in Park Together allowance.
What would be the park?
The
That's not
park
ours.
may be an opportunity, to the park that's outside, if we want to enhance that with some type of public art, we might.
Cleveland's park, though.
It is actually the maintenance responsibility of Downtown Cleveland Alliance.
Okay. Well, they can handle that. Have we yet to put together an employees group that's going to help us as we buy furniture and various things that these folks are going to be spending 8 hours of their day in every day for 5 days?
We have talked about that, and we have not identified the individuals that will sit on that committee. But that's one of the things, as we get closer to the furniture pick and what we do, that they will be involved in that.
Memo for you, and I'll get that to you for that with suggestions from Steve Zanoni. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Director, do you have any intuitive sense as to why we're coming in near the high end of the 110 to 170 per square foot range?
I would say because this is a budget, and as we get into more of the details, I believe that number will come down, but the range of numbers that you're dealing with that you have seen are actual numbers, and this is a budgeted number. So we want to be conservative on our budgeted numbers.
And Madam Chair, Director, how is the 36.1 million going to be paid for?
Can we wait until Wade comes back? Sorry. I guess I need to be a little bit more clear on what our responsibility is versus what Geis's responsibility. In our lease agreement, Geis had an allowance of $50 a square foot, so the 36 million is not completely our responsibility. $50 per square foot, which equates to about 11 million, is Geis's responsibility. So in essence, our budgeted amount would be 25 million.
Okay. Madam,
Want to ask the question again?
yeah, Madam Chair, Director, the question as revised is, since the Geis allowances for $50 per square foot would cover 11.1 million, leaving 25 million out of the 36.1 million TI budget, which is our responsibility. And the question is how will that be paid for?
To the council member through the chair, it would be the same way we pay for other capital projects that we've undertaken. We do have a reserve. We would utilize those reserves to pay for the project, and then we would bond it out so that the repayment period is over. Again, if we're in the building for 30 or more years, then you would make that payment over the 30 or more year life of the bond. In the short term, we have reserves to fund that, and then we would bond that out with other projects. It wouldn't only be this project, so I want to be careful that I'm not just bonding this amount, but there are other projects going on right now. And so you get critical mass, you would do a bond issuance of more than this amount to pay for all the projects, and we'd repay ourselves.
And Madam Chair, Director, how good a shape are we in terms of bonding capacity, in terms of running up against various limits? I know in the last bond issue, we had to do that deal with Highland Heights in order to create enough bonding capacity so that we could do what we wanted to do.
To the council member through the chair, it depends if we're doing revenue bonds or if we're doing geo debt. In some areas, we have less capacity, but in terms of, I think the general question is, what shape are we in? We're in good shape in terms of our rating and in terms of our revenue stream to issue debt to pay for this and again, other projects. It would just be whether or not we can issue general obligation debt or revenue debt.
All right, Mr. Greenspan and then Mr. Schrein.
Great, thank you. Actually, Director Steen, part of my question was asked by Mr. Miller, but the 25 million or so that it's being discussed today as far as being in the budget, is this in the projections that were given to us, both the May, I believe it was May 3rd, May 16th, May 3rd or 2nd would be the general fund number. Was this 25 included in those projections?
To the council member through the chair, no, it was not in those projections. I was just consulting with Director Tewan. As she's refining these numbers, and these would go on into 2014, and so what we provided is what we knew at that point. Once we have a final number, then obviously we would update all of those projections for you. But again, the expenditure on an annual basis would be the debt service. I don't want to have someone believe that there's a $25 million expenditure every year. It'd be the debt service on $25 million, which is what you would see on an annual basis.
So from a cash flow standpoint, then this would be a Q, if we're moving in 2014, Q2, Q3 spend?
To the council member through the chair,
2014.
again, I'm not sure when the expenditures will be incurred.
Okay.
It'll probably be more in 2 and 3. I would say 1, 2, and 3, starting out real small in January, or at the
Deposits and things
beginning,
like that.
right, 1, but the majority of it in 2.
And so assuming everything's in place by Q3, this 25 million is not in our bank right now with the expectation of bonding to recoup that money and then finance it. What's the expectation on the bonding to take place so that we're able to recoup that cash into the reserves?
To the council member through the chair, I want to be sure I respond accurately. When you say Q3, you're talking about Q3 of 2013?
14.
Oh, Q3 of 2014? I guess a couple of questions were asked. One is, we do have that money in the bank. We have that money in reserve, so we have the money. When we would issue the debt would be after consultation with our financial advisor in terms of looking at the market. But ideally, we would want to have closer to $50 million in capital projects to repay ourselves so that you can spread all the costs over a larger pool. So I would have to look at what other projects are ongoing right now, include this, and then we would project out. But it wouldn't be before 2014 that we would bond this out because we're not going to incur it till then.
Right. That's what I was getting at. After the expenditure is incurred, at what point do we anticipate the bonding to recoup that money? But if you're saying it's going to be part of a larger bond, that's fine. And then I have another question for Ms. Teowen on and I'm trying to, I don't have my notes in front of me on this, but I know there was a Plain Dealer article when we addressed the county's portion of the TI, and I thought the number we discussed, we went through a pretty diligent explanation of the various components, was $75 a square, not $112. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't think so. We got these numbers from Ryan, who would have given us those last numbers, and it really depends what you're looking at. There's no two buildings that are exactly the same. And for example, Ryan moved into a new building, and he has certain costs in his building, which are actually a little higher than this, but he doesn't have the security that we have. There's not too many office buildings that have the security requirements that we have. So that's why we like to stick within this range, high and low. I don't think we would have given anything as low as 75. If we did, it might have been just for walls and doors, maybe one part of it.
I'm going to try to find that article or my notes because it kind of detailed out. We went through IT, furniture. I remember specifically identifying numbers attached to each of those line items. So I'll find that, and okay. If we can find, maybe our staff can find that Plain Dealer article because it listed out everything that backed into, and I believe the number was $75 a square, but I could be thinking about something else.
So we're going with everything we read in the Plain Dealer is true?
No,
Oh, you sound like me.
no, they were good archivists on that discussion, so.
Yes, Mr. Miller, you're out of, Mr. Shrine had a question.
I'll defer, but then I have a follow-up on
Okay.
Greenspan.
All right, go, Mr. Shrine.
Thank you, Madam President. All of, you're saying that they're stubbing it out to the IT piece, the security piece, the electrical, HVAC is all getting stubbed out, and then it's our...
At each of the floors.
Yeah, and it's our responsibility then to distribute that all the way throughout. So there was never even an inclusion of any perimeter wiring for any of the offices that were going to be going in any of the base bid.
It's coming up through the spine
Right.
of the building more or less, and that's traditional in vertical construction build-out, is it comes up through the spine and then it's tapped out there at that point.
Okay, so there was no anticipation even of offices that we knew were going to be in there for county offices, for executive offices and all those things? None of that, okay. So once it gets stubbed out, whose responsibility is for maintenance of the wiring and all that that has to be maintained? I'm sure there's probably some fiber going to be pulled in this building. Is that all covered in the lease?
That's in the maintenance agreement, correct?
The maintenance of the building, guys, is maintaining the building for us.
The
No,
building, but all the stuff...
TI, I think, would be our responsibility for the TI. I'll double check, but the TI
Well, that's,
improvements would be ours.
That can be an expensive piece of, from where it gets stubbed out to all these subs. So we ought to really make sure where that responsibility is. If we're talking 8 floors of responsibility of redistributing that throughout the whole building. Can you clarify whose responsibility it is to maintain that for the entire length of this lease?
Mr. Miller and then Mr. Jones.
Madam Chair, a follow-up question to Director Steen, if I could. When we issue this bond issue for which you want to do $50 million in projects, could that include the anticipated takeout of some of the economic development projects, or is that an entirely different funding stream that would have to be a separate issue?
To the council member through the chair, that is a good question. We could, and I used $50 million as a hypothetical number. As the council knows, the last refinancing we did, we took out some old debt as well as issued debt to pay for projects. We would find where we could find efficiencies, taking out old debt, funding ED projects, funding capital projects. And if you can do all that together, you spread the cost again, it's more efficient. We'd have to look at everything that we have going on.
So those two could be combined?
They could be combined, and we could have old debt that we could take out at the same time and make savings there too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bonnie, can you tell me what plans we had for community outreach for potential subcontractors on the project?
I can speak on the, we had a memorandum of understanding executed with GEIS, and it did a number of things. Number one is, as you're aware, the Port Authority, as part of the financing, had a minimum of best efforts to achieve at least a minimum of 20% MBE, FBE requirement. And what we did with GEIS and the memorandum of understanding was a number of things. Number one is we made it even also our requirement that they comply with so that they will report to us whether they're also complying with the port's requirement. Number two, we had a 40% county residency. Number three is we required them to have a minimum of 2 open houses to advertise any bidding opportunities in the community. Number 4 is we required them every time we do there is any bidding opportunity comes up, that they would send by email the notice of the bidding opportunities to all the entities that are listed in our SBE registry and also on the City of Cleveland's MBE and FBE registry. Now, I thought that they already had, Bonnie would have the more details in terms of whether they already had I thought I heard that they already had one of the open houses for the MBEs and FBEs to let them know of the bidding opportunities available. And we have to meet with them on a quarterly basis to monitor the compliance.
And the open house would have just been at this time for the core and shell portions of it, not the TIs yet.
Have they happened as of yet? The first open house?
The first one did, was it last week? Oh, there were 2 of them already? Okay, for the core. For the core, for the building itself, not for the tenant improvements.
Tell us a little bit about those open houses. What was the attendance like?
Yeah. I can't answer that question. Well, I'll have to get with Geis. I did not personally attend the open houses myself.
I'd also like a copy of the MOU.
Oh, absolutely. I thought we had already, we'll definitely email it to you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, are you still in progress?
No, I'm good.
And just so I understand, what was the reason they could not share the attendance of the open house?
She wasn't there.
Yeah, I was not there. I did not attend the open
Oh, you
house
did not
myself.
Is there a representative from Geis who could possibly share?
Yeah, what I'll get from you, for you, is I'll contact Geis and get, usually there's a sign-in sheet. I'll get a list of the sign-in sheet and get some information from them. Steve, did you attend, Steve? No. Okay, all right.
Madam President?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
Director, can you send us over today's slide presentation?
We already did, right?
You
I
did.
think Joe has them. Joe has them.
Okay, thank you.
So the last thing is other contracts that we see, that we anticipate
We
coming
don't
up.
have that on the screen. Okay.
No, we don't have nothing on the screen now. Oh, now.
There we go.
And
So-
Bonnie, could,
Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
I'd just like to share with you, I did attend an open house today for another project, it was just a state, it was the Inabel project. Several of the bidding vendors had open houses in the community. So I attended just to get a sense of the room, what it was like, and I was impressed by the transparency of their process. Now, obviously, they couldn't say everything because they were bidding against others, but they did a good job of just letting that industry know that there is an opportunity. Here's our point person, there's an opportunity for you to connect. So it made sense, the way it was conducted, how it was conducted, the consultant that they had that helped them with the outreach to the community. I was just impressed by this one particular vendor. So again, I say all that to say, invite me to the next open house. I'd
Will
love to
do.
be a part.
Okay, thank you. So the last thing is other anticipated contracts that you'll see coming up relatively shortly. We are actually currently advertising for a moving consultant, a relocation consultant, somebody that's going to advise us on the actual move itself. So we're advertising now. We hope by the end of July that we will have a consultant in place to assist us, to get us ready for that move. In addition to that, we will actually hire the physical movers.
Who ran the truck?
We'll rent a truck and council can help move. We'll provide the pizza. So we'll have a couple of different moving contracts, the guys that are actually moving the files. This also includes the moving of your computers also, that there'll be a company that wraps them up for moving, and then our mover will actually move them to the office that they're supposed to go to, and then Jeff will hire a consultant that actually connects them and make sure they're all up and running. That's included, that particular is included in the miscellaneous IT contracts. There's various contracts to make sure that our security, our phones, our IT systems are all up and running. Some of these will be amendments to current contracts, maintenance contracts that he has on the IT side. But we wanted to make sure that you saw that cost, and that's included in there. The last thing, and this is, we threw this in here, we're not sure we're gonna have this expenditure, but we had talked about the cafe that's gonna be on the first floor. What we're going to do is we're going to bid that out where the vendor actually builds the space out themselves, so that they get what they want, what their standards are. Every different food vendor, they might have their own standards if they're a franchise or whatnot. If for some reason we don't get any bids with them providing the build out, we budgeted a line item that we might provide some money to assist with the build out for that cafe area. So we're not sure if we're going to spend that $100,000, but we wanted to put it in as a line item just in case. So, and those, as of right now, those are the expenditures over and above the TI, what we anticipate. And you'll see most of these contracts coming before you in some type of award of a contract.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Schrein and Mr. Miller.
Has the RFQ gone out on this, you say?
For the relocations consultant, yes.
Will that change if we accelerate the pace of the move?
Because it's.
We go 6 months sooner?
Because, don't remind me.
But it kind of needs to be done in the RFQ, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
If you're the recipient of it.
Because it's an RFQ and it's for qualifications, we can make the selection based on qualifications, and then when we negotiate the scope, we'll have an if authorized for the interim move.
Okay, there'll be 2 moves, though.
Yes, yes.
So will that,
Yes.
I assume these numbers will all change if there's 2 moves.
This actually, we adjusted that, assuming that we're gonna have the interim move, so that's all inclusive.
So what are we looking at here? Are we looking at 2 moves or 1 move?
This, actually, this includes the interim move, the final move to the headquarters, and also the storage move. The move
Okay.
into the storage facility.
And then does this include temporary rent or?
No, that's a whole nother conversation we need to have as far as budgeted items for that.
Okay.
And we're still working on those
But
numbers.
this is already at the higher level, assuming that they're, other than the rent, this is already picking up the cost of the interim and a final move.
For the move consultant, correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
I'm sorry, there will be for the interim move as far as the IT contracts. The interim move is not included in the miscellaneous IT contract. So what we're doing is we're setting up a separate budget item for the interim move.
So the interim move is in the relocation consultant fee.
It
It's
is.
in the mover's fee,
Mover's fee?
but
Okay,
it's not in the IT.
correct.
How about it in the temporary cafe for pizzas for the?
Correct.
All right, okay.
Okay, Miller, Rogers, and Gallagher. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Director, there is an item on today's bi-monthly fiscal agenda for $300,000 for moving expenses. And my question is as to why that number is different from the $400,000 number that's listed here, and where the other $100,000 will come from.
Actually, the 300,000 was for the move consultant, but there's an additional 150 for the interim move to assist us with that, and to also assist us with the storage relocation.
So the action we take today on the budget adjustment would only provide for the first part of that, and we would need another one to do the rest of it.
To adjust that, correct.
Okay.
And again, until we actually know, I mean, those are just budgeted amounts. By hopefully the end of July, we'll have an exact dollar figure on what that will be, because we'll be negotiating with our consultant at that time.
All right, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about what goes on into an actual relocation consultant. It just seems odd to me that it costs more to plan the move than to actually move.
And that's a good question, because when I first heard of a moving consultant, I asked that same question. The moving consultant is the orchestra leader, the conductor of the orchestra, that they're the brains behind the operations, that when you're looking at a move, that it's the consultants that puts together the plan as far as how you move. For example, that in your office that you have now, you have certain items of work. They'll give you a box that has numbers on it. That will help identify where you're going to. Offices are somewhat easy because you're moving from Office A to Office Z in the new building. But what gets difficult is the files and how you move files. And particularly because we're in different locations, it gets a little bit more confusing. So this consultant really determines how this move is going to be made, so when the movers don't have to think, they just have to look at the box and say, oh, this goes here. So they're responsible for tagging everything. If there's furniture that's being moved, they tag it with an identification number so that the movers know exactly where it goes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Bonnie, the credit union, I went through the floor plans, I don't see the credit union on there. That was something that we brought up many, many moons and many, many times. Why has that not been addressed?
We have submitted a price to them per square footage, and it's really up to them whether they want to move into our building or not. They have a location not too far down the street, so we have not heard back from them as far as them wanting to be located in our building or not. We do have some square footage on one of the floors in the back corner. I can't remember, on one of the floors. They don't need that much space, so they are actually they anticipated downsizing from the square footage that they have in the current administration building. So if they decide to move into our building, we have some space for them.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jones? Yeah.
Just a question again, going back to the memorandum of understanding. Is there any language in there speaking to bid bonding? I know it's particularly in construction is needed across the board, but is there any consideration of looking at the contracts and say, is there something like painting or washing of a window that might not require a bond? Is there anything that's in this project that might have the potential to not be require a bid bond?
And I think we're using different terminology. The bid bond from the
Help me
performance
with
bond.
the
I think you mean the
terminology.
performance bond, which
Performance
is
bond, thank you.
This is a private construction project, and it's a design build. So when it comes to performance bonding, there's more flexibility, and sometimes it becomes duplicative. So under the lease, guys have to have the major trades bonded. Now, within that, I think there are some of the lesser things that may not require bonding to be done. But again, I think we, as part of our risk management contract that we did through the law department, we have specifically part of the duties of our risk management consultant and who's provided the brokerage, who's providing us with the insurance services, is to always assist any of the contractors that want to do business with a company, with a county, now in this case, they're not really doing business with a county, they're doing business with guys. But we provide assistance to them in terms of how they can get bonded or how they can get insured, because we run into that quite a bit when people are doing contracting with the county. In this case, the contracting is with guys, but the requirement is that the major trades have performance bonds. And I think I can find you the definition of major trades. It's defined in the lease. I'll have to look for the specific section.
Okay,
All right,
So it's
any-
100% bonded fully, but the major trades have to be.
okay.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you for the update. We have our next meeting on June the 25th. And I think a number of issues have been raised, and I think we should have another update, a continuing update before every meeting, so that we can keep fully abreast of this. And we can maybe get some answers to some of the questions that we raised today. All right, any other issues on the county administration complex? Any miscellaneous business? Or any public comment related to this work session?
There is none, Madam Chair.
Okay, if not, the work session stands adjourned. We start at 5 o'clock at our regular meeting.
At $75.